podcast for the Crary Art Gallery. With us today we have Lyon Paul, who's going to be exhibiting with us at the Crary Art Gallery from September 1st through September 22nd. Welcome to the gallery, John.
Thank you, Brad.
You seem to be on a personal journey as well as one as an artist. Can you describe that process for us?
Well, art has become a meditation for me, and I guess what may have alerted you in the bio is that I started doing artwork simultaneously with the practice of meditation. Mm-hmm. So that sort of both practices, the artwork is an active practice, and meditation is really receptive. And that's I started that now almost 40 years ago. So it's really a lifelong practice. But yeah, it's ongoing for sure.
So what came first, the meditation or the art?
They were simultaneous.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely simultaneous. Before I started to work in the visual arts, I was a writer, and I was in the midst of writing a play, and everything was going quite well. And in the middle of one afternoon, I looked at my hand, and I thought it did not seem to belong to me, and I was totally kind of flummoxed. And I went outside and walked around, and I realized that the way I experienced it was writing was taken away from me. Uh-huh. While walking around, I picked up a little piece of cedar wood. I had a pocket knife, and I carved it into a rooster. I'd never carved anything before. It was just a spontaneous act. And months later, when I put everything together, I realized that something was taken away and something was given to me at the same time. I just didn't recognize it at the moment. So my first artworks, as I started meditation, were actually carved from wood. Mm-hmm. Long explanation, but that's how I experienced it.
But you progressed from there to painting.
Oh, yes, yeah. It was. I did sculpture for several years, and I had a very strong dream experience, which was very colorful. And the next day I started painting. I never went to art school, uh-huh. So I have no formal training. But my experience of doing artwork is really that it's a gift to me, uh-huh. And it's a gift for me to give others.
And what was the first medium you're using in your artwork?
Very first was carved wood, directly carved figurative sculpture. Mm-hmm. Humans and animals and so forth, and also some metal. But they were figurative images, which changed after a few years. I wanted to explore the meaning of a vow of silence. And so I took a vow of silence for 7 months, during which I made a sculpture called Vow of Silence. Mm-hmm. So that, and the form of that was not figurative, that I needed to find a new and different form for that.
Uh-huh. I'm curious, in terms of the Vow of Silence, you had an expectation of how long you're going to take that vow, and you just fulfilled that, or you just felt you?
No, my vow was for as long as it took. Uh-huh. It was a very formative experience because immediately after taking the vow of silence and knowing that I wanted to do a sculpture, which is after all a three-dimensional form, what form would that take? Mm-hmm. Right. Suddenly I thought, what material should it be, and what form would it take? And I went through lots of thinking about it for, I guess, weeks. And one day I just walked up to a lonely spot on the hill in the woods and stretched out on the ground and said, okay, I give up. There's no way I can decide what form a vow of silence should take. I just have to continue being silent. And that night I had a very strong dream, the kind you have a few times in the lifetime, where I was dreaming, but I could see the room I was in, but I also saw in the air the shape, and I have the habit of reading on going to bed. There was a book by my bedstand, so I grabbed a pencil and the book and turned it to a blank back page, and I drew what I saw in the air. And the next morning when I woke up, I thought, oh, I had this strong dream, and I looked in the book, and there was the drawing of the sculpture I was to make. Isn't that weird?
Yes.
It was really unusual, but our creative selves act in mysterious ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting story. And you went from sculpture to painting, and in that process, did you go through a similar type of self-awareness exercise?
Yeah, I did. It was another dream, and I had been doing sculpture for maybe 10 years, and one night I had this dream in which I had a mason jar with a lid on it,
Mm-hmm.
and being my own straight man, I thought, I wonder what's in the mason jar.
Uh-huh.
So I took the top off it, and thousands of butterflies flew out of it, and no two were alike. They were all different colors. It was like this flood of colors coming out, and the next day I started painting.
Oh, nice. And so was butterflies your subject?
No. Of course not. But yeah, that's why I say it feels like a gift.
Mm-hmm.
But we all have gifts, every one of us, and no matter what our gifts are, it's up to us to develop them. Mm-hmm. So that's where the practice, so to speak, the practice of art or the practice of medicine or whatever, practice of parenting come in,
And I'd like to ask other artists the same question, but when you're working on a piece, how do you know when it's complete?
It's a great question. It actually, there's kind of a famous quote from the early abstract art days. And, the difference between, say, tying a paintbrush to the tail of a mule and letting him swat it across the canvas and an artist stopping is there is a moment of resolution. When we listen to music, we use the word resolution, and a song resolves, comes to a conclusion. And it's very obvious when you hear it. Well, it's the same for a painter. When you're painting something, there's a moment when I like to say that the painting becomes fully itself. And one time I had a dear friend in the studio, and I was showing her a number of paintings I had done on paper that weren't yet framed. She wanted to get up to date with what I was doing. And we went through them all. And then I said, hey, I've got an idea. Why don't we go through them again? And I'll just tell you what the last mark I did on this painting was. And you imagine that away and see if you understand how it resolved. And we did that, and one after another. She was just sort of amazed. She said, "Oh yeah, now I see. That painting it really is complete. It's like, instead of being incomplete. So it's hard to say what it is, but it's resolution. There is a resolution that happens, and to push it beyond that is it's messy and unnecessary."
Now, what the people are going to see are the Mylar and glass studies.
Yes.
And this is going to be translucent, so is this going to be backlit?
the paintings in the show are either on Mylar, which is a very tough but clear film, plastic film, or on plate glass, quarter-inch thick plate glass.
Right.
And the process is that I paint on the back of, let's just say, the glass or Mylar.
Oh, gotcha.
And so I actually paint almost entirely with the glass or Mylar on a table, flat on a table. So I'm standing and moving around it, painting, so to speak, down on it. Let's say that I make a black line with acrylic paint, and then let that dry. And then I'll take another color, say red, and I'll make a brushy wash of red over the black line. Now, what I'm looking at would be red. I would have obscured the black line. But what the viewer will see in the finished painting is the other side. So if I were to then hold up this Mylar, you would see a black line with red behind it. Mm-hmm. So these paintings are painted from the back, and which means that even as I'm painting them, I'm obscuring from my view what may be primary on the other side. So it's really a very interesting activity for me. My visual memory is really strongly engaged. It's really exciting. And also, it's in reverse. The image is reversed when you turn the glass over.
Sure.
And for instance, I sign these pieces on the bottom, and so from the viewer's side, my signature is backwards. Because it's written on the other side. Let's see, the paintings, when they're done, are mounted right against a foam core board, a white board behind them that they touch. And so that they're not illuminated from behind. They're illuminated like any watercolor or canvas painting from the front. But you're, so to speak, looking from at the shiny side of the glass.
Sure.
On the other side is where the painting has been applied. The paint has been applied.
Mm-hmm. Where would you like to see your work evolve from here?
Well, I even though I started to do sculpture and later started to do painting, I do both to this day. And before starting this series of studies, some of which will be in this show, there are now over 50 of these studies that I've done in the last 2.5 to 3 years. Just before starting these studies, these paintings, I worked on a sculpture for almost every day for 2 years. Mm-hmm. So I worked back and forth in 2 and 3 dimensions, and also from the world of color and line of paintings to the kind of solid materials I use in sculpture, and they kind of feed one another, but I usually don't work both painting and sculpting simultaneously. I usually finish a piece and then... So when you ask where I'm going from here, I have lots of projects, sculptural projects. I also have another group of paintings I'm working on that is sort of on hold while I'm working on these studies. And that is a series of paintings called Shrouds for Children, and there are only 2 of them at the moment. But they're paintings in the form of a shroud, that is to say, a cloth. They're not painted on cloth, but they're as if they were cloth. A cloth that one wraps around the body of one who's died. Mm-hmm. And it sounds maudlin or negative, but each one of these paintings is about a particular child whose death was caused by some human intervention, some large event.
Mm-hmm.
And the two children who I've done shrouds for right so far are a boy who was Austrian and who was killed in Auschwitz in the early 1940s, named Georges, and a girl who was in Biafra and starved in the late 60s due to an embargo of the government of her tribe. And both of these paintings are extremely colorful, though they're completely different palettes from one another, as befits these two children who were very different from one another. So anyway, that's kind of a poor explanation because it's a very complicated and long-term project. I imagine that at some point there will be a couple of dozen of those paintings, mm-hmm. and that they'll be displayed together, each one with an accompanying photograph of the child. Mm-hmm. And even though it can sound, well, it's certainly there's a great sadness, but I found in painting each one of these that I felt like I was releasing this child's potential and beauty back into the world and giving back to the world something that the child would have had he or she lived. Mm. So that's a long project. I really don't know how many paintings there'll be, but yeah, that's one of the many avenues I'm exploring, as well as some big sculptures I have planned.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I'm sure the people who visit the Crary are going to see something special in your work, and we're looking forward to having you at the Crary. And again, you're going to be at the reception on Saturday.
Yes, yeah.
From 6 to 8 p.m., so people have an opportunity to meet you and talk to you live. So,
I'm very much enjoying my reception by folks at the Crary up to this point, and I visited Warren for the first time earlier this year, and I'm planning to do some hiking around the area too.
Oh, so, great!
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the opening and to meeting folks.
Oh, well, thanks for taking the time to speak with me, and we look forward to the show.
Thanks so much. Of the studies in the show, there are some that are painted on Mylar and some are painted on plate glass. And the first ones I did were on Mylar. I did about 30 or so paintings on Mylar. They're all 24 inches by 24 inches. All the paintings in the show are square. It was totally experimental for me. I started by applying acrylic inks to them, and Mylar and glass are not absorbent like canvas or paper or wood or other surfaces one paints on. So one of the characteristics is how the paint flows and dries and clogs or whatever. There are different characteristics because it doesn't absorb. And so the thickness of the paint is one of the things that I think people will enjoy about these paintings. They are in places very opaque and dense, and in other places very lightly painted. So there's a sense, as you stand in front of one of them, of different depths. I'm not speaking here of perspective, though a number of the paintings are based on landscape or the elements, mm-hmm. And there is a sense of perspective. But I'm speaking in terms of the quality of reflection of light. Anyway, in pick one, the earliest painting in the show is number 2, is Mylar study number 2. And it has very light treatment with very free brushwork. And I think people find it very refreshing. It's and yet it has a complexity. One has the feeling of space and earth. This does relate to the elements. There's less fire in this, but there's certainly water, earth, and air in this piece. And as one looks at it, it's almost like you could be looking through a cleft in rocks with sky above, or you could be looking down at a river. So there's sort of a mixture of perspective, so to speak.
Sure.
And as I say, that was actually the second piece I did. If we move to, let's move to Mylar Study 6, which has some diamond shapes in it, and I think it's worth noting that a lot of my painting I mix what you might call natural shapes, squiggly lines, and so forth, with geometrical shapes, with straight lines or geometrical shapes. In this case, you'll see diamond shapes in the painting. And I find that both are natural. We have crystals that are perfect squares and so forth in nature. But it's very dynamic to see both of these kinds of shapes, what I call natural squiggly shapes, next to geometric shapes. And this painting also has some bits of map collaged, and there's a blue kind of arch in the painting, which if one zeroes in on, you can see is actually a painted bit of map.
Oh, yeah.
So a few of them have some collage elements. A lot of my paintings outside of this series involves painting over collage, so kind of something to notice there. If you go to Mylar Study 14, you'll see there's a lot of sort of squares. This is a piece which is meant to be pretty much based on a fanciful landscape, and the squares are kind of the sky area. Again, they're very rich, and they're like gems when you get close. It's very intimate. There's also kind of lavender kind of square shape mid-left in the painting, which feels like a window. It's almost like suddenly you can look through the painting. That's the kind of translucent area, and there's more opaque areas that sort of hold you back visually. Study 15 has, if you think of the elements, you'll see sort of a blue water element, and I think of the top where there are lots of squares as a sky element. The lower part has a dark area, which feels like it's inside the earth. Moving to number 20, this is a piece that I privately call, even though it's called Mylar Study 20, I call it Eagle Fire Dance. And if you kind of look at it, you can see an eagle in it, and you can see perhaps a human with an eagle hood dancing, but it's very fiery. This piece has more fire than anything. So a lot of these paintings, I'm experimenting not only with the sense of landscape, but really the elements. Mylar Study 21 is based on a landscape, and my personal name for it is Wheeling Sky. So that may get in the way of how people see it, or it may open it up. The next painting I did is number 22, and that is a piece that is featured on the postcard for this show, and signs that I've seen Crary generate. And this piece is a landscape, and it's deliberately meant to be a mountainscape right after a rainstorm. Mm-hmm. And the top of it has very strong brush strokes that kind of dancing across the top of it, or lifting off of the earth. And if you've ever been in a car wash, there's one part of the car wash thing where these big canvas things. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, not the brushes, but the canvas things that sort of swipe across the car. Right. And that's how the sky feels in this one to me. And I think you'll see in studies 23 and 26 and 27 that those three are all based on landscape, particularly 26, which has a lake in the foreground and a sky. A lot of people find that a very strong image. And of course, there's a lot of orange in it, so in a way it's very fiery too. Mm-hmm. In starting to paint on glass, I also changed how I was painting a little bit, that I think it's hard to describe. But one of the things that you'll see in the show is that all the paintings on glass have a border that is gray. Not all the images that you'll see with this interview will show that border, but it represents what a matted surface would be in a regular painting, around the painting, between it and the frame. Mm-hmm. But here you'll see, if you look at that gray area, and some of these paintings you can see it, you'll see ink lines and smudges and splatters of ink and spatters of paint. And those are actually the first marks that I made on the glass, so that at the end, when I painted the gray area around to sort of set off let's say like a setting of a gem, set off the painting, caught in the matted area, the gray area, are some of the earliest gestures. So there's sort of a little bit of kind of painting archaeology there. Mm-hmm. But it's something that the more I painted on glass, the more I've worked outside the margin of the original square in that gray area. And you'll see, for instance, if you go to study 19, which shows clearly at the top some diamond shapes that are really in the gray area, in that area. And also at the bottom of this square of the painting, you'll see that it bulges, so to speak, into the gray area. So this is a painting that's not confined. And in fact, I think I supplied a detail of that, so you can zoom in and see the upper left quarter or so of the painting, and you'll see there's actually some collaged map behind the glass too. Mm-hmm. So you'll see some lines that are there that are actually maybe even numbers and words, if you can see them when you get close to the painting. Right. That also enliven it. So there's a lot of techniques I'm using in these glass paintings. But looking at the borders of them is kind of an exciting thing, because the question is, where does the painting stop, comes to mind. Right. I think like a Zen koan. There's no answer to it, but maybe many answers to it. And then in the later glass studies, say studies 20, 24, and 25, they start to look more like maybe windows, in a sense. Mm-hmm. There's some grids that perhaps are like mullions or frames around windows. They're not meant to be stained glass, but they refer to that. And number 24 and 25 are actually larger than all the other paintings in the show, and they'll probably have to be on easels, but they'll be accessible to see. They're 40 inches square. The painting in a square is a pretty interesting thing. There are not many paintings or photographs or computer screens or stages or books or video or computer screens that are square. They're rectangles, and square has been thought by some to kill an image, and part of what I was doing in these studies is to explore that, and I think that I'm not the first to explore that, of course, but it was part of what I was, it was a way I was sort of restricting or constricting my approach that actually freed me up.